Hi guys, Ryuu here from Blender Bros and welcome to Machin3 Tools tutorial. This tutorial is gonna be split in two parts. Part 1 we will be talking about Pie menus and part 2 we will be talking about tools. There's a lot to be covered, so let's go. Now before we start with the tutorial, I would like to tell you where to get this add-on from and also which version to get, because there are two versions. You can get it from Blender Market and you can get it from Gumroad. Now if you go in for the free version, which is called Standard, I suggest you get it from Gumroad because on Blender Market you will have to pay at least $1. Now there's this Deus Ex version, which is the paid version, which is the one I'll be using in this tutorial. And I actually highly recommend you get this one now, because it used to be the previous version before the update, which happened yesterday. You were paying additional $10 for the edge constraint tool, which is cool, but you know, you're not gonna be using it on a daily basis. It's a very rare case use, but it's a really powerful tool. However, the group tool, which is really robust and very interesting, and also the punch it tool, which could be extremely useful for modeling in quick extrusions, now this actually makes it a really interesting offer. So I would highly recommend you get this Deus Ex, and I have this feeling that there are more tools coming to this version to make it more appealing than the free version. So I would probably stick with the Deus Ex version, so you know, grab it from Gumroad and you're good to go. So once you download the add-on to your computer, go to Edit, Preferences, and then Install. Go to Downloads, click on the add-on, install, and you're good to go. Now we're going to be talking about Pie menus in this video, which means I'm going to be disabling these tools. But before I do that, I want to show you that, you know, all these tools comes as disabled by default. So people often message me and say, you know, Machin3 Tools doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work because you need to enable tools that you're going to be using. Only these three tools come as enabled by default and the rest is disabled. So make sure that if you, for example, when you want to use cleanup, you're going to actually enable cleanup, all right? So there you go. We're going to be disabling these two and we're going to be focusing on Workspace Pie first. But before we do that, I want to show you how it works in vanilla Blender for those of you who don't know, okay? Now, before we jump into talking about all these Pie menus, I would like to tell you that there is a free course right now you can download and start working on hard surface model from scratch to a final render. And this course utilizes the Machin3 Tools add-on we're going to be talking right now about, and also utilizes PowerServe, which is a fantastic add-on that we're going to be actually mentioning later on in this video. So if you would like to put the knowledge into practice and start using Machin3 Tools and get used to add-on workflow, this is your fantastic chance. So go ahead to our website, link in the video description, go to blenderbros.com, download the course and enjoy. So if you want to switch between edit mode and object mode, you just press tab, right? And you're gonna switch here between object and edit mode, right? You can see here on the top it switches between two modes, and you can start accessing, you know, faces, vertices, and edges. So here, when you press 1, 2, or 3, you will be switching between 1 vertices, 2 edges, and 3 faces, right? That's a lot of clicks, which is where this add-on comes in with the Workspace Pie and makes it much more easy. So when you enable this here and save preferences, you're gonna be good to go. Okay, so let's talk about how this Pie menu works. Now there are two ways of using this Pie menu, okay? You can press and hold Tab key, or you can tap it once, all right, like this, and you can this menu will stay permanently until you right click, okay? So when you press your tab and you hold it, then you can move your mouse to respective areas and you can see they're gonna highlight. When they highlight, when you release tab, you're gonna enter this mode. So when I wanna switch to object to vert, all I need to do is press tab and move my mouse to the left. And I don't have to be super precise. You can see I'm way past this button and it's still being highlighted. As long as you're on the left side here and you release and you're good to go. And this is the trick because you can be very fast with it. We can switch extremely quickly between these modes, right? So I can go from object to face, you know, in one swipe. You press, you hold, you move, you release, okay? Once you remember where they are, you can be very quick, okay? Additional options are here. These are different workspaces, so you can go to sculpting, you can go to vertex painting, you know. Now, when we're gonna go to edit mode, to let's say face mode, you'll see that when I tap my tab key, I'll have two additional options here. One of them is occlude, and the other one is auto merge, and they both actually found here on the top in Blender. This one is X-ray or occlude. You can access this in edit mode. And this one is auto match. Now, this X-ray will allow you to select edges or faces or vertices that are normally invisible because they're covered by a mesh. So this could be very convenient when you're working on something and it's just, you know, behind the mesh. So you can turn that on here, so you don't have to move your mouse all the way up here to turn it on. And auto match used to be hidden. Okay, now it's here, but it used to be here in the end panel, hidden under tool, under options right here. So, you know, it was a bit of a bastard to get to, but now it's here, so it's quite easy. But, you know, still it's under your mouse cursor, so it's really convenient to turn it off if you need to. And this one, what it will do, it will merge two vertices into one when they're gonna get really close to one another. So when I go GG and slide it over, now this is gonna become one vertex, right? Whereas when you have this turned off, you know, you got still two vertices, all right? That's basically it in terms of this menu. However, there's a really cool trick that I want to show you, and it's going to be with a cylinder. So let's say you have a cylinder, right? And we're going to go to edge mode, right? And we're going to select this with Control Alt, all these loops here. We're going to go here and we're going to checker deselect, which will deselect every second edge on this cylinder. We're going to press X and we're going to dissolve them, okay? This will basically half the resolution of this cylinder from 32 verse to 16. Now that's cool, but what if you had a bit of a complicated shape like this and you wanted to do the same thing? So you Control Alt click here and Shift Control Alt click here, and then you're gonna go to select and checker deselect, and you know, and there you go. Nothing works. It's just, you know, Blender gets confused. But there is a workaround with this using machine tools, and there is a hidden menu for that. So if you alt click this loop and go to vert mode and then switch to checker deselect, right? And then you're gonna tap your tab key. So you just tap it. You're going to control click on edge, right? You're gonna select these edges, every second edge here, plus this edge around. But you can remove this edge around by holding Shift and Alt and clicking on it. And now you got this selection, exactly what we wanted. Every second edge is selected, so you can, you know, half the resolution of this again. So really cool trick. Before there was actually a tooltip here on the bottom saying, you know, press and hold Control, but it's gone. But it still works, it's just not displayed anymore. So it's a hidden tool. Really cool to know, sometimes could be very useful. Okay, the next is gonna be Save Pie. So you enable it in here and you can see that there is a new window with new options here. And I suggest you disable this. And this is quite useless in my opinion. Also, you can check key maps here under key maps, so you can see which key is responsible for which pie or tool. You can click here and, you know, reset it, or you can just assign something new. If you're an add-on user, or even if you're a vanilla user and you want to use add-ons, I would highly recommend you guys start using add-ons for hard surface modeling. And I would recommend getting Hardops and Box Cutter Bundle, Machine Tools of course, and other add-ons like KITOPS, Cablerator, etc. You can look in my video description, there are links, affiliate links to all the add-ons I'm using and recommending, and I never recommend add-ons I don't use for my workflows, so you can be sure that these add-ons, they are linked in the video description. I use them every day. So check them out. Add-ons are a fantastic way of actually improving the speed and efficiency of your workflow. And let me tell you that the time I save working with add-ons is insane, and time is money. Now, going back here to this option, why I told you to disable it, let me just show you what it does. Okay, so let's leave it enabled, and when you press Ctrl S, you're gonna be enable this Save Pie. Now, this option that I wanted to disable is this one, Enable Screencast, and what it does, basically, it will tell you what you do in Blender, which is kind of redundant in my opinion, and clutters the view, so I don't really need that, I never use it. Let's just switch it off in here in Preferences. So go to Machine Tools, right, and disable it. False. Save, we're good to go. And now when you press Ctrl S, you can't see that it's gone, which is perfect. Okay, now let's start with the middle part here, the OBJ export and import, really self-explanatory. It allows you to import or export OBJ and FBX files. The same menu is in here, the only difference is that you need to look for these files, you know, that's FBX, the OBJ. I wish there was also a SVG added to this list because I use it sometimes for creating decals. But you know, other than that, that's a pretty cool tool. Same menu basically, so if you click on import, it's literally the same as in here, okay, the same window, right? Just a shortcut. Bottom is quite easy to understand too, is this open, new, save as save, the same as in here, okay? And incremental save. Now, I don't use this because I'm using Power Save by Buongiorno Severin from Team C. That's a free add-on as well, and I highly recommend you get it. These are my settings. And this is how I have it set it up, and it just simply saves my autosave to a separate file every 2 minutes, which is brilliant. And this is actually working pretty well with these machine tools, and I'm going to explain you why in a second. So I do not use this. However, I do use other options here about which we're going to be talking right now. So let's load a file here. You know, let's load this drone, okay? And let's say I'm modeling something here, and I saved it, and then I, close my Blender and I go for a dinner. I come back and I want to go back and really quickly load my previous file very quickly. I don't want to look for it. So all I do is press Ctrl S and most recent, and there you go. And if my Power Save, okay, has an autosave saved to that file, which means autosave will be an additional file linked to this file, I will get a prompt window here asking me whether I want to load in the autosave for this mother file. So this is how you can very quickly load your autosave via Power Save through Machine Tools, if it makes sense. So basically you got this main file, okay, and then you use Power Save to create an autosave file, which is a separate file to which Blender is gonna save changes every 2 minutes. And when you click on this most recent, you're gonna have a prompt window from Power Save asking you whether you want to load this file or not. So it's really quick. So when you crash, okay, your Blender crashes, you lose about 60 seconds, 90 seconds of work. And you can also change it here to, let's say, 1 minute. So the Power Save is going to be saving every 60 seconds, right? So really powerful stuff. So this is fantastic. I use it all the time. Here you can review all most recent files you've been working on, so you can load them in, right? Very easy, no problem. Now, when you're gonna be using these two options, you will notice that we're gonna have two additional buttons in here. These are really cool, and I wanna show you how they work. So when I'm gonna load the file from this folder here, right? And then I'm gonna press Ctrl S and press next. It will load the next file in the list in that folder. But the problem is you see that each of these files has a different angle, right? Different angle of this model. But what if I wanted to load it in at a specific angle to check the progression of my modeling? Or perhaps I wanted to create a time lapse, You can do that by holding Alt. So watch, if I press Ctrl S and hold Alt and press next, my other file is gonna be loaded. Next file in the line, okay, in that folder. Now it's 14 here on the top. Ctrl S, hold Alt, now it's 15. Ctrl S, hold Alt, now it's 16. And you can see there are more and more elements being added to this drone. So if I go backwards, you can see that the element's gonna be disappearing. The UI stays the same, okay? Everything stays the same, the camera angle, everything. But you're loading a different file on top of it, which is brilliant because you can see your progression. This is one of the coolest features of this Pie menu. Here you can load in the recover autosave, and then you can revert back to your original save. I don't use this again because I'm using Power Save, so I don't really use that. Now this is really, really interesting, this right hand side menu. We're gonna be talking about it. And you got here append link, then you got here external data, purge, and clean out blend. Now clean out blend, what it will do, it will remove everything in current Blender file. But be careful because it keeps the name. So if you if you save over, you're gonna be removing everything that you deleted. Okay, so be very careful with this. All right. So just saying, this is it could be very dangerous. I'm not really using that because if I want to clean my Blender, I just simply go here, general, and I'm reverting back to my default, default Blender save, right? So I don't really need that. Let's just load back this drone back. All right, perfect. Now let's keep going. So now append, this is really cool, guys. All right, append is really cool. So watch this. If I have a new file here, okay, I have a new file, right, and I'm going to add a cube, okay, I'm gonna have a cube here, and let's say I wanted to add some elements to this scene from another blend file, okay, so I'm gonna press Ctrl S, I'm gonna click on append, I'm gonna go to my desktop and go to my file with drone, click on this file here, and I can choose anything I want. I can load brushes, collections, all that. Let's say collections, right? And append, right? Let's load all of them. Boom. And I have everything loaded into my blend file. Because you loaded this mesh physically, you appended it to your blend, you can actually edit it in here, right? Now the link option is a little bit different, because link option would allow you to do, it will allow you to bring that stuff into the blend. However, you will not be able to edit it. So let's just load in just a mesh. If I try to edit it, I can't. But what I can do, I can actually open the Drawn 10 blend library and edit it from the library. So it's going to open additional blend file, okay, which I will be able to edit. So this is the original file, okay, that's been linked over here. So now I can edit this right here. And if I change something in this blend file, right, let's just select maybe these faces and just, you know, move them up like this, right? And this will be reflected, well, if I save this, right? If I save this here, this will be reflected in this file here to which I linked, which is really interesting, okay? So you can do that with link. So, you know, link and append, very cool. You can append and link materials as well, which is pretty awesome. So not just geometry, right? Now here, this one is really useful. This is when you want to pack your resources. That's what I'm using it mainly for, when I want to pack external data into my Blender. So for example, I got HDRI files, I got texture files, and I want to pack it into Blend because I want to send it to someone, I want to use it on a different computer. The Blender, how Blender works, right, is let's say you have, you are adding a HDRI file to your shader editor Underworld, okay? So I'm going to click here, Control T, with Node Wrangler, add the HDRI here, right? So let's just add it. And this is actually not in my blend file yet, okay? It's just simply linked somewhere from my hard drive. So if I save this file and send it to someone, they will not be able to see that file. However, if I'm going to go to Control S and I'm going to here and pack resources, you'll see that it packed one file, which means this HDRI was now packed into Blend. So when I save it, it's going to be included in that Blender file, okay? So this is what it's for, okay? So the purge option here, this one is really awesome. Let's add the matte here with hard ups, which we're going to add matte to this cube. Let's then remove it from the cube. But you can see that the material still is in a blend file, okay? It's in orphan data now. So what you can do is go to Control S and purge it and remove it from here. If you have really stubborn data in your blend file, and you can go here to orphans and click on purge, and sometimes there's additional data here that the regular purge didn't remove, what you can do is hold Alt and you can purge all reclusive data, which is should remove everything, okay? So there you go, guys. That's everything you need to know about the Save Pie. Okay, let's keep going. The next one's gonna be Shading Pie. That's actually a pie I'm not using quite a lot. In fact, I'm not using it at all, but I'll show you what it does, all right? Also here you can see that the Shading Pie, when you enable it, we got this window popping up here. We're gonna explain this in a minute. Let's go to Key Maps. The Shading Pie is evoked by pressing Page Up, which is not really very convenient, so you might want to remap it to something different. Save Preferences and let's go. So let's press Page Up and let's have a look at this, okay? Now Shading Pie is going to be quite complex, and it's going to be even more complex if you're going to add some mesh to your scene. And you're going to click on that mesh to select it, because then you will have additional options that will be directly related to things you can do to your mesh. So for example, you know, you have this name here, cube, which is consistent with the name in a collection. You can display name of this cube, so basically cube, and then you can display axes, which is the same thing you can do here under viewport visibility, viewport display. You can turn it on and off. It just, you know, takes a lot of clicks to get here. So here then you can toggle smooth or flat, which is the same thing as you can do here. So shade smooth, shade flat. So when you right click with the mesh selected, it's the same thing. So quite frankly, this is not really that needed. Then you have angles here, also auto smooth. You can turn auto smooth on. It's just the same as in here. So if you go to normal auto smooth, you know, when you work with vanilla Blender, that's actually quite useful. I work with hard up, so I don't really need that. because auto smooth and shade smooth are being added automatically upon clicking sharp. So you know, shade smooth, shade flat, and then when you shade smooth you always have to enable auto smooth, which is a lot of clicks in Blender, right? So you can do this here under this pie menu, and you can also change angles of auto smooth, which is the same as in here. Now I'm using hard ups and box cutters, so when I, for example, go to sharpen, or when I want to, for example, use bevel, you know, all these are being enabled automatically. So for me, this menu is completely unimportant. Now this one and this one, these two massive menus are actually from here. So you got these two menus combined, including these options. So, you know, shade wire, shade solid, and the rendered view. So you have all of them bunched up here in one massive menu. You can display stats here on the left side, which is kind of redundant too, because I prefer them to be displayed on the bottom. When you right click on the bottom bar, you can enable the stats here on the bottom. So I don't really need that here, just too much information, too cluttered. I wanted to keep it clean. You can switch off cursor and origin points. I don't know why you would want to do that, but you can if you want to. So you can disable the visibility of cursor and origin points, or all at the same time, right? The same here, you can, with this pie menu, you can disable overlays, which by the way is accessible here. So it's, you know, there's a button there for this as well. Now, backface culling is used mainly for retopologizing. When you, for example, retopologize something around the mesh and you do not want to see the faces behind the mesh, that's actually quite useful to use backface culling. I use it very rarely. Now, relationship lines are between parents and children. So when you shift D, shift click, Control P, and create a parent-child relationship here, you can see if I move my parent, I can move the child with it, right? So here you can disable this relationship line, this kind of like a dotted line, and between these two. This could be actually useful when you have a lot of children and it's just, you know, quite convoluted. It just, you know, you have a lot of these lines, it just gets annoying. You can very easily turn it off, right? So that could be quite useful. So that's that. Now, face orientation, really important. I usually have it on by default. So when I go here and, sorry, it's here, turn the face orientation. Let me show you my personal settings for that, because traditionally in Blender, you would see this cube purple. Because face orientation, when it's blue it's good, when it's red it's bad. So when I select this face, press Alt N and flip it, I'm gonna have a flip geometry, meaning this face is flipped inside out. It's called flip geometry, and when I'm gonna run bevel on it, I'm gonna get this kind of a mess. All right, so you need to flip it back to its original position. So, you know, all the red faces are basically inside. Okay, so red is internal and blue is external. The reason why I cannot see the blue color is because I had it turned off under my viewport. So let's go to themes, 3D viewport, and here under this option you can slide this alpha to 0 and reduce the visibility of this, you know, kind of a blue color. So you can have this flipped faces turned on permanently, and you know, you don't have to really worry about toggling back off and on. So, you know, usually I have it turned on, so when something is flipped I can see it immediately on my mesh. All right, let's continue. Now here on the bottom we get grid, so you can switch off grid, right? And all the axes. You can do the same thing in here, so you can turn off the floor, you know, you can turn the Z-axis on and off. The same menu basically. Wireframe, if you want to display wireframe of the object, let's say you, for example, working with bevels, and you do that. I'm working with hard ups, so for me this is redundant, because with hard ups what I do is I go to bevel, press Z, and I can see my wireframe, press Z again, and the wireframe is gone. So it's, you know, this one is basically useless for me. Then you have the object axis. That's actually quite interesting, because let's say you work with, we're gonna be actually talking about the next pie menu, which is gonna be cursor and orientation pie. Now this gizmo actually is quite useful, because the origin point, which is inside here, inside of this dot, inside of the cursor, could be sometimes rotated, and you can't see that because it's just a dot, right? So for example, if I'm gonna have let me just enable this, let me show you how it works, okay? I'm gonna enable another pie menu here, which is called cursor and origin pie. Here, this one, all right? And this will allows you to, let's say we're gonna grab this edge here, Shift D, and rotate it. Now this edge is rotated, right? So the local orientation is different than the global orientation, right? This is a local orientation, this is global orientation. So if I rotate this edge, right, and I'm gonna move my cursor to that edge, okay? So Shift F, move to edge, you see that it will rotate, okay? And you can't see that basically that easily, so this gizmo would be very helpful for that. And if you have more than one object, right, you can actually deselect everything, okay, and then you can assign it to everything. All right, so you can assign this axis to all the objects at the same time if everything is deselected. So there you go, that's very useful. We're gonna be discussing this rotation a little bit later when we're gonna be talking about this cursor and origin pie menu. Now here, when you have this object actually selected, you can actually change the size of it and opacity. So you can change the size and you can also change the opacity of this menu. Here on the bottom you have outline, which is the outline of an object. I don't really use it because, to be honest, it's useless for me. But you can change the outline of an object itself. So when you have, for example, a cube, right? A cube's gonna have an outline, and in this case it's blue. And you know, every single cube you're gonna sort of duplicate, or whatever object, you're gonna have an outline around it. I don't really see a point of it. All I need to see is just the outline of the object I have selected. So for me, that option is absolutely useless. I don't use it. Cavity, very important, but I don't really use cavity and curvature through this menu. You can actually, you know, very precisely adjust different kind of settings here. I don't really use that because I'm using cavity through this menu here, and that's it. That's enough for me. So this will display different settings for the curvature and cavities on your mesh. I don't use it. Basically, I use cavity through the Blender default settings. It's perfectly fine. Now this one here, this is all about matcaps. And basically the way you display your object. So for example, you can switch here from studio to matcap, and you can switch between different types of matcaps. This is very useful when you want to preview something, like you have, for example, some curved geometry and you created some booleans and you want to see the shading, you want to see how light is falling through. It's very useful. Now the cool thing about this menu actually is matcap flip. That's actually pretty cool. So you can flip the matcap here, you can flip the lighting to another side, which will basically change the way the lighting reflects from the surface. That is actually really useful. This could be very powerful when you you want to see a shading on a specific area on which light doesn't fall, so you can flip it. And matcap switch, okay, in this case doesn't work because we need to enable it. I told you we're gonna come back to this option here, so let's do it now. So let's go to preferences and let's actually enable this matcap switch here. So what it will do, it will basically switch between two different matcaps. So what we need to do, we need to type an exact name of each of the matcaps you want to switch between. So if you hover over here, you can see that this one is called metal_carpaint.exr. So we can type it here, carpaint.exr. Okay, and let's say this one, right? This one's gonna be reflection check vertical exr. So reflection, okay, check vertical.exr, right? And we're going to save this, right? And now when I go to this pie menu, I want to switch matcaps. You can actually flip between them and see how different matcaps react with this shape. And this one here is going to switch between different ways of viewing your scene. Let's do the matte here just with regular Blender, and we're gonna make it blue. Now the material is blue, but we cannot see anything because we will need to be in look depth or render view to actually see the matte. However, you could see this material if you actually colorized it. So if you, for example, went here and you colorized it, right, you would be able to see that in viewport. But if you don't want to see that in viewport and you want to turn it off and you want to just for the time being look at only at objects, you can simply switch to object and the material view preview is going to be removed. If you wanted to really quickly preview this matte that you created in viewport with Machin tools, what you can do is click on this matte icon. And it will basically, sort of colorize. I think it used to be called colorize, now it's a different name. You simply click on matte and it will actually show you that. Now these options here on the bottom, like for example, active for collection group, etc. What you can do is you can transfer material from a certain object to other objects. So if I, for example, select all these, it's gonna basically transfer mat from active, which means the last selected, to every single other object in the scene. So if I click active, this color from this cube is gonna get transferred to these two. And the other options here are similar, just basically they relate to collections and groups. The group is grayed out because I don't have any groups created, okay? So that's how it works. Now, when you're going to actually switch your viewport, so when you're gonna, switch your view here, okay, from the 3D viewport to, let's say, look dev, you're gonna be able to see a completely different pie menu. And now this pie menu here could look very complicated, but quite frankly, it's exactly the same as the pie menu here under render. Okay, so when you go to render and you can see all these settings here for EEVEE. So if I'm gonna switch here to EEVEE, right, because lookdev is actually an EEVEE engine, all these options here, the most important ones, so for example ambient occlusion, bloom, etc., are basically bunched up in here. So you can very quickly switch between different types of quality. So you can go from low, high to ultra, and for example high is gonna have bloom turned on, the ultra is gonna have volumetrics turned on, but you of course have to have lighting to be able to see that. So these are different presets of settings that you can set here in this scene, all right? And then you can, like I said, turn off space reflections, etc. So all the settings that you see here are in this tab, all right? And then you can of course switch to different HDRIs here. The only problem I see here is that you cannot actually load your custom one, because when you go here to the scene here through this arrow in Blender, you can actually load here through this cogwheel your custom HDRI. So this would be a nice addition in my opinion to this pie menu. And you can of course rotate it, change the strength, etc. So, and there you go, that's how it works. Now the last thing I'm gonna talk about is the bottom bit. So overlays, again, you can just turn them on and off. Same here. Then you got wireframe, you can just basically shade wireframe, or you can just shade it solid. You can do all kinds of things in here. Then you got the rendered view, which is going to bring it to the render tab, and then back to solid. And then this is a material tab, so the look dev basically, right? So material is look dev. I don't really model something and then keep previewing in look dev. I just finish modeling and then play with mats. And when I play with mats, I'm constantly in look dev or rendered view, so I don't really bother with this. This is why I don't really use this pie menu. And quite frankly, most of these settings I don't really change that much. So this is not a pie menu that I will be using in my workflow. However, the next pie menu we're going to be talking about, which relates to the camera, it's an extremely powerful pie menu and I use it all the time. Okay guys, next pie menu is going to be Views Pie. I do not change these settings, leave them at default. Let's save preferences and let's keep going. So now the Views Pie is one of the most powerful pies in my opinion in Machin Tools, and I absolutely love it. So let me just show you how it works. So let's load the most recent file, which is going to be the drone. There we go. And we're going to set the camera here with this pie menu. Now this pie menu is brought up by page down. So you can remap it if you want to. And it just simply governs your camera settings and viewport settings. This is really powerful pie menu. So let's just see how it works. I don't have any cameras in this scene and I'm gonna be setting my first camera. So let's just grab this drone and position it somewhere here, and let's say I wanted to add a camera to view. If I wanted to do this in vanilla Blender and my cursor, let's say, was in the world's origin, what's gonna happen is that I'm gonna be adding camera literally over there. So the camera is somewhere here and now we need to adjust it, move it around. It's just really annoying. Okay, it's not very intuitive. So the way you do it with Machin Tools is very cool, because you adjust your view the way you want it, and then you simply press page down and cam to view, and then you can adjust your focal length. So you press page down and you adjust your focal length. Let's say you're gonna be going with 135 mil, and then we're gonna zoom in to fill the frame. Press page down, lock cam to view, and then you're gonna be moving with the camera. The camera will be moving with your view, which is brilliant. So you can, select the drone, frame everything perfectly the way you want. Let's say this is a really cool framing, and we're gonna press page down and unlock from view. And now let's say I wanted to create a second camera, for example, from somewhere here from the back, okay? So somewhere from here, right? Let's just select this, set this view here, press page down. Now if I'm going to add secondary camera, what I need to do is press Alt and hold Alt while clicking this Smart Cam View, and then I'm gonna have a second camera. See, there's a one camera, that's my second camera. So let's zoom in and let's just, you know, increase the focal length to maybe something like 85, and then just lock cam to view. Right, it's the same drill, and let's just move it somewhere here and, you know, sort of adjust it the way we want, something like this maybe. And page down and unlock from view. And now I got two cameras, okay? Now let's say that I wanted to move this camera to a different position, okay? So let's say I don't really like this position here, okay? I want to move it, let's say, somewhere a bit to the, you know, to the right. Maybe kind of like a sort of a, you know, kind of a bottom shot, you know, at the angle here, right? So I press page down and I simply click cam to view. So it's gonna move this active camera, so the selected camera, right? So this one here to my view, which is brilliant. So now, you know, I have my camera here. So I can then again lock to view and I can just keep adjusting it and, you know, the way I want it, right? Something like this, you know, and then unlock from view, okay? So this is how you can easily move cameras and add different cameras. You can switch between cameras. So when you have camera selected, you can go to next camera, right? Or previous camera. And you can basically flip between them, which is really useful. Now, if you, for example, in a scene somewhere here and you would like to look through one of these cameras, normally what you need to do is press Ctrl numpad 0. But with Machin Tools, you can actually use this top button Smart Cam View, so you can basically view through the camera that is currently selected. So, like that, okay? Really cool and useful. Now these other menus here, let's talk about them. So you can change views here, so you can look from bottom, right? You can look from left, right, etc. These are basically orthographic views from different angles. On the custom views, I don't really use them. You can simply adjust your view according to the local or cursor orientation. And here you have orthographic view, right? Perspective view, which is kind of redundant because you can switch it very easily with numpad 5. I have it bound to my mouse. And then of course, you know, the lens focal length. And the last one is reset viewport, which will basically align you to the y-axis. So there you go, that's the menu explained. And here you have a front, orbit selection, top and right. So, you know, you have front, right, top, etc. And orbit selection, basically what it does, it toggles on this option here in Blender. So when you go to preferences and you go to navigation, orbit around selection, I have it selected by default. What it does basically, when you select an object, you will be orbiting around it, okay? Otherwise, Blender just has some weird algorithm of orbiting, you know, and sort of rotation, because that's the object I'm focusing on, right? So that makes sense. It's very intuitive. So this, you know, is turned on by default. I don't really turn it off, right? Now this function here, the turntable and trackball, it will basically change the way you rotate in. This one is really confusing, guys. I don't know if I'll be using that. It's kind of very, very weird, okay? Very difficult to control, and you can switch back to trackball. So, you know, I don't really use that. If you want to create some really cool orientation and, for example, some really interesting Dutch angles, what you can do is go with the local custom view, and you can create some really interesting, you know, angles here with this enabled. But other than that, I don't really use these options here, but they're there if you would like to try them out. And that's basically it, guys. It's all you need to know about this Pie menu. It's extremely powerful, especially these options here. I'm using them for every single render I create. They're very intuitive and very quick, and I bloody love them. Okay, guys, the next pie is gonna be Align Pie, and that one is really essential. The keystroke for this one is Alt-A, so that's the shortcut. I would suggest you keep that because it only works in edit mode, and it's also really convenient to press. So when I'm gonna go to my Blender and I'm gonna go to edit mode and I'm gonna press Alt-A, you'll see that we're gonna have this Pie menu. And this is a really, really powerful tool. Now there are two versions of it, two modes of it. One of them is axis based and the other one is view based. The axis based one is older and it's less intuitive because it basically works purely off of axes, so it's mathematical. This one is far more intuitive because it works based on your view. So depending where you're looking from on your object, that's how the alignment is going to work. Okay, so let me show you how this works. Let's say that we're going to move this vert somewhere here into North Korea, and we want to sort of align it back into this cube. So we're going to select this vert and shift select the vert we want to align to. We're going to align our view in a way that we can see that sort of from this angle, Alt A, and we're going to align it to the left. And just going to align it on this axis, on the y-axis, okay? We're going to pull it back to the left, and now we want to align it to the top. So we need to rotate the view, align to the top. Now we're going to select this vert, and we're going to align to the right. We aligned, basically. That's a cube. So you see, you need to pay attention where your view is, where you're looking from, and what you're aligning to. You can align more than one vert. So if you, for example, have two verts that you want to align, you can do that. You just simply select the vert you want to align to as the last vert, and you align. Now, in addition to this one, okay, if you hover over one of these keys, you will see two additional options. This control option is actually new. It was added in Machin3 Tools 1.0. So the Alt one will actually help you to align stuff in world space, and the control will allow you to align stuff according to cursor. The align tool works in local orientation. So if your object is rotated and you, for example, want to align something locally, it means in local orientation, because this is global orientation, right? It's Y, X, and Z, right? And if you press Z again, that's local because the cube was rotated, which means there's a local orientation for this cube. By default, this tool works in local orientation. So if you, let's say, align it here, let's say you're gonna be aligning it to the top. So let's select this. This works in this local orientation. But if you want it to align to a global orientation, you need to hold Alt. So press Alt A and hold Alt, and you can align it in global orientation, which means it will be following the global world axis. Okay, so that's the difference. And of course, cursor is via control. I don't really use cursor orientation, to be honest, but the other two are quite useful. Now the tool here is the center, horizontal, and vertical. What it will do, it will center your geometry, okay, horizontally or vertically, based on local or global orientation. Okay, so if I'm going to select these two verts and I'm going to, center them horizontally or center them vertically, based on local orientation, I just have to click it. But if I want to center them in global orientation, I need to click and hold Alt. Right, so if I'm gonna move this cube somewhere here, okay, and I want to center these in a world orientation, I'm going to press Alt A and hold Alt and center them horizontally based on the global orientation of the world. This is how it works. You can very easily center the whole object this way, horizontally and vertically. By holding Alt, you can center it horizontally and vertically in the world space. Okay, so that's how it works. All right, so let's keep going and let's look at the straighten tool, which is really powerful. So let's just extrude this, scale this, and our straighten tool, which is basically here, okay, can work with verts or edges. All right, so you can select verts, right, and you can straighten them. Now the way it works is basically straightens vertices or edges based on your first and last selection. Okay, so if I select this vertex first and I'm going to select these vertices last, the tool will straighten this edge along this axis here. Okay, just like that, you see. And if I select edges, it's gonna create a similar effect, which is pretty bloody cool. All right, and you can work with multiple verts and multiple edges. So for instance, if I'm gonna have something a bit more complicated, right, like this, okay, and it's gonna be, I don't know, moved somewhere over there, okay, and this one's gonna be moved somewhere over here, and I wanted to straighten these two verts, right, according to this angle. What I need to do is select this one first, these two, and then this one last. And then when I'm going to write straighten, it's going to align them here, okay? And that's local orientation. You can also do this in global orientation by holding Alt, because this tool works, the same way. So that's how the straighten tool works, all right? Very powerful, very cool. Now this pie here, it's a zeroing pie. You can actually zero your geometry based off of the bounding box, world, or cursor. So let me show you how it works. In Blender, basically, if you want to zero a geo, you're gonna press SX0, for example, or SY0, and it will flatten the geo on the respective axes, right? So if I wanted to use this pie menu, this is not axis based, because if you want to use axis, you have to go here, and you're gonna have an axis based zeroing, okay, here. But this one in views it's view based, and it's actually it works off of the bounding box, world, or cursor. So I can zero that horizontally in local orientation, okay, based on world, or for example bounding box or cursor. I can do this on cursor as well, but I can do this in the world space as well, which means I'm going to hold Alt. So if I'm going to hold Alt here, and I'm going to horizontally zero that based off of the world orientation, it's going to bring it back to the y-axis. If I want to do it on cursor and I move my cursor somewhere here, it's going to basically move it to the cursor horizontally, or or vertically. So you could really precisely, sort of orient your geometry. And again, if you want to work off of axes, you need to go here, and then you can choose specific axis you want to zero in. So if you wanted to zero that, okay, let's say in local orientation on z-axis, you simply have to press here, okay, boom. And it's gonna zero that on z-axis, because that's the local z-axis of this object, right? According to bounding box, right? And if you want to do this according to world, you need to go to axis and then click on Z here, boom, right? And this would be everything you need to know basically about this align pie. Now, I don't really use much of this, right? But this basic align and straighten tool, they are just an absolute godsend, guys. I mean, these tools are insanely useful. And align pie I use a lot when I'm modeling, especially when you want to recover from some kind of a disastrous boolean. Let's say you got a boolean like this, right? And you want to collapse it, occasionally it's going to be quite difficult to do. But if you wanted to, for example, move your vertices to a specific point or area in space, in 3D space, you can very easily, align them with a specific verts on your mesh. So this is a very powerful tool and extremely useful in modeling hard surface. Okay guys, let's move on to the cursor and origin pie. Fantastic pie, incredibly useful, has exactly the same shortcut as original pie from Blender. But before we're gonna actually talk about it, let me show you how it looks in Blender, vanilla. Blender vanilla pie menu for cursor is awful. It's just overloaded with data, very difficult to read, and also doesn't include origin point. So when you, for example, want to move origin point, what you need to do, you need to go to object, set origin, and use that menu. Irritating. So this menu solves this problem because it actually puts both menus into one and makes it far more readable. You launch it here with the same keystroke, which is Shift S. Let's see how this looks in Machine Tools. Shift S pie menu is really clean. The reason why it's clean is because instead of words, uses icons like cursor to origin, cursor to selected, and this is object, right? Selection, so selection to cursor, right? This is offset. We're gonna be talking about it in a minute. And this is origin point, which is basically this menu here, right? Set origin to. Very cool. So let me show you how this works. If I'm going to move this cube here, so I'm going to Shift D that, right? And I want to move my cursor to that cube. Moving cursor to selected is always on the left side, okay? Always here. Whether it's a vert or it's a face or it's anything that I have selected, it's always on the left side, which is why it's so intuitive, because I don't have to think about it. I simply use my pie menu and my muscle memory kicks in, and when I want to move cursor to something, it's always going left, okay? Then when I want to move something to cursor, it's always going to be right, which means if I want to move this cube to cursor, I'm going to go right. If I want to move this vertex to cursor, I'm going to go right. You see what I mean? It's so intuitive. It doesn't shift. So you can easily remember where things are. If you want to move cursor back to origin, you're going to move, top left, always here, diagonally, okay? So really awesome stuff. Now, if I have more than one cube, right, and I want to move them to the cursor with offset, what I can do is select all of them, and I'm going to move them together to cursor with offset, because if you want to select this option, they're going to move all on top of the cursor, right? So if you have multiple selections, what happens is that the bounding box is being moved. So the bounding box around these cubes is going to be moved in offset to the cursor. Okay, so that's how it works. You see that when I'm going to hover my cursor over one of these options, I have Alt and Control, and Alt is only reset cursor location and only reset cursor rotation. And here, only set cursor location or only set cursor rotation. What does it mean? Now let me show you. Let me just move this cube here and let me rotate it, and let me select this edge, and I'm gonna move this cursor, okay, to this edge. Let me just select axes here and make them a little bit larger so you can see. All right. Notice the orientation of the cursor and notice local orientation of this cube. So when I move this cursor to the cube by just simply moving it regularly to just to edge, it will move that, yeah, and it will rotate. Okay, so it will rotate accordingly to that edge. But what if I didn't want to do that? What if I wanted to move the cursor, okay, over there, but I didn't want to change the rotation? Well, you can do that by simply selecting the edge, tapping Shift S, and then setting only cursor location. So you hold Alt, okay, and you move only cursor location. Now the cursor moved, but it didn't rotate, and this is really important because it might affect mirrors, especially when you're working with origins. So now let's say that you move this cursor to your edge, but you want to actually rotate it. So what you now need to do is press Shift S and simply hold Control and click, and it's gonna rotate according to this edge. This is really useful, guys, and it's an extremely powerful tool, and it will save you a lot of time actually looking through menus in Blender, trust me. So this is really very useful, okay? Very powerful menu. Now, you also have the ability of moving your origin point, right? So if I'm going to, for example, grab a mesh and cube, and let's just reset this to origin and reset cube to my cursor. Let's say I wanted to, you know, move my origin point, which is in the middle, to this edge. So I'm going to go Shift S, right, and simply move my object origin to edge, and it's going to move to the middle of the edge. You can also move it to cursor very easily, right? The same here, okay, when you're moving origin, all right, you can also lock the origin rotation, and let me show you why this is so important, right? So I'm gonna just create a cube here, move it in here, right, and I'm gonna rotate the cube. So watch this, the origin point rotates with the cube, right? You see these axes, they rotate with the cube. These are axes for the origin point. All right, so the origin point rotates with the axes, and now when I'm gonna, for example, move it here to the edge, so Shift S and move this origin to the edge. So let me move it to the edge. You know, it will follow the rotation because, you know, this edge is actually follows the local rotation of this cube. But what if you have an edge that is actually skewed like this, and you're gonna move this origin point to that edge, but it will follow the rotation of this edge, and there's a problem, right? Because when you want to now apply mirror, the mirror is going to be following, okay, the orientation and the rotation of this origin point. So what you want to do, right, is you want to move your origin point, okay, but you don't want to affect its rotation. So watch, you're going to press Shift S and you're going to hold Alt, move it to edge, and it doesn't really follow the rotation. So now when I'm going to use a mirror, it still mirrors based on the local rotation of this cube, okay? So this tool can save you a lot of headache, and especially when you're working with some really complicated rotations and some complicated geo, where you need to move your origin point back and forth. And in the same way, you can, you know, adjust the rotation of this origin point by simply going to Shift S and holding Control and clicking on edge, which will align this origin point back to you know, to this edge here. There's one more option here in the bottom called to active. So if you have multiple objects selected, right, and the last object is active, okay, so this one is an active object because I selected it last. If you want to move origin points of all of these cubes to active, it will basically, all these origin points of these cubes gonna shift here. So for instance, if I wanted to rotate this cube around its origin, which is here, it's gonna rotate around this cube. So you can easily set the rotary point, you know, this way. So this is an interesting option. I don't really use it, to be honest, but you know, you could use it for some more complicated manipulations. And the same here, you know, Alt, it will set the origin location, and the Control will set origin rotation. So if this object is rotated, okay, and you move your origin point to that object. You can choose whether you want to set rotation or just location. So really powerful stuff. Continuing on, we're going to be talking now about Transform Pie. So the shortcut is Shift-Control-A. Let's save preferences and then see what's up. So Shift-Control-A, and this is your Transform Pie. Now Transform Pie is really easy to explain because basically what it does, it combines two options from the Blender window, which is here, so the transform orientation and the pivot, and also add some additional options. So first of all, you know, these are self-explanatory because they're identical to these ones on the top. The custom orientation, if you don't know what it is, it's really cool. I can show you. It's basically setting custom orientation to a specific object or a base of a face and its normals. So let's say this cube, right? This cube has a basically global orientation. There's no local orientation for this cube because it's not rotated. So it's only a global orientation for this cube. So basically follows the world's axis. However, if I had like a chamfer here, well, you know, this chamfer is actually sort of angled, so it doesn't really follow world orientation. So if I wanted to move this cube along this face, I would need to use this face normals to actually create a custom orientation. You can do that either by using this option here, so the plus, or simply going to Shift-Control-A and clicking on custom, which will add this face as a custom orientation. And now you got a local orientation for this cube based off of this face orientation. So that's basically it, okay? And let's just reset it to global. Now the bottom part of this menu is actually interesting because this will allow you to change both pivot and orientation at the same time by using this point menu. You will see that it will switch here on the top. If you go, for example, for cursor, you're gonna have cursor in both, so both for the orientation and pivot. So this could be very handy if you want to switch between these very quickly. Now this one is really awesome because you can actually affect specifically only origins, only location, on only parents. Now let me show you how it works. Let's say you got a cube here, and you know the origin point of this cube is actually following the cube orientation and location and rotation. So let me just show you. If I'm gonna assign here the axis, so I'm gonna actually turn the axis of this cube. So these axes here in the middle, these are axes of the origin point. So now the origin point orientation is gonna follow the cube, right? But what if I wanted to affect only the origin point? Well, I can do that by using this pie menu and clicking on origin, and now I can actually rotate just the origin point, which is pretty bloody cool. And let me show you why. Because the orientation and rotation of the origin point will affect how the mirror behaves. So you can create some really cool stuff like this. And the same, you can do this here with location and parents. Now parents is pretty interesting because let's click on parents. Let me show you, right? Let's say you have a cube here and you had two duplicates here, right? And these two cubes were parented to these ones, so Control P and parent. And you can see these parenting lines. Normally what happens if you rotate a parent, it will rotate children with it. However, if you're gonna switch that on, and you're going to affect parents only, you can just rotate parent without affecting the children. So this is a really cool stuff when you want to create some, you know, I don't know, custom, alterations to the parent and you don't want to affect the children. This could be a very handy way of handling this. The next pie menu here is going to be a snapping pie, so let's enable it. Okay, save preferences. And now here, the snapping pie, if you're going to look at the keystroke, I mean the key shortcut, is Shift-Control-S. all right, so Shift-Control-S. So let's save that. Okay, let's talk about this pie, guys. Now this snapping tool is available here in vanilla Blender. You can snap to different elements, and also if you click on one of these elements you can see additional options here. And this is a magnet which basically enables auto snapping, otherwise you need to hold control while snapping. So if I'm going to Shift D this and make it smaller, and you know, create a chamfer here so we have a surface that is slanted, and I'm going to select this cube and press Shift S, which is the Machin3 Tools snapping menu, and let's for example select surface, which is basically the same thing as face here. So now if you select the surface, which is a face basically, you can turn on the align rotation to target, which basically when you hold control, you're gonna be aligning to specific faces. So you can see there's like a circle with a line, and the line indicates the direction of normals. Okay, so you're gonna be snapping to different faces, which is really useful. This is the tool I'm using the most. And then you can snap to vertices. So you can snap to specific vertices, right? Here you can choose how you want to snap this object to the object you're snapping to. So let's say closest, right? It's going to be the closest element of this object. If you, for example, choose center, it's going to snap the center based on the origin point, and so on and so forth. So this is really useful, right? Here you can show the menu that's the same as basically here in Vanilla Blender. And here you can enable the grid snapping. So if you turn this on and then click on absolute grid, what you can do is actually snap to grid. Okay, if you hold control, you see you can snap to grid, depending on what kind of grid size you're looking at, because the closer you zoom, the more dense the grid becomes. It's infinite, right? Infinitely kind of divided. So the closer you zoom, the more dense grid you will see. And that's how it works. You can snap to grid, you can snap to verts, edges, etc. Okay. Now, in terms of active, so if I'm gonna, multiply these and move this one somewhere here, and let's say this one is active, I'm gonna select these, and that last is an active, and I want to snap it, the active, to this object. I can select this option here. So Control Shift and active, and then I'm gonna be snapping active element to this object. Okay. So that's how it works, all right? So if you have a group of objects, that's what you can do, okay? So this pie menu is not something I'm using a lot because I'm not used to snapping unless it's some annoying people. But, this menu will do me. Basically, I almost always use face because that's how you want to snap. Sometimes I use edge center, which is kind of useful because it will snap to edge center. But other than that, it's, not something that I use quite often. Okay guys, and next pie is gonna be collections pie. This one is actually pretty cool and pretty straightforward. So let's just save that, and the shortcut is Shift C. Okay, so first of all, you have two different modes of this pie. Okay, if you have nothing selected and you press Shift C, you can create new collection, or you can purge empty collection. So if I create new collection, I'm gonna call it 1, and this collection, let's just put it somewhere here. That's an empty collection. If I want to purge it, I'm going to press Shift C and purge empty collections, and all of empty collections going to get deleted. So this would be your, basic behavior. And here, if you press Shift, you can select all the objects in the current collection, which is really awesome. And then you can also you can deselect all of them with Alt. But to be honest, if you select them all, right? So you're gonna shift click, you can just simply click here, on a canvas to deselect everything. So you don't need that. Otherwise, if you want to select everything, you need to go here and you need to select objects. So it's a bit cumbersome. This is faster, right? So you simply select all of them, right? Another thing you can do, you can actually click on this eye here to turn off visibility of items in collection, and you can turn it back on. Now another menu here is hidden. If you select all of these objects here in this collection, right, and you press Shift C and you control click on this menu, right, you disable the ability to select them. So you cannot select these objects anymore in Blender, right? So you need to go here and actually enable them manually, or press Shift C and control click again to enable them. So this is how it works, yeah? So this would be this menu, and then, of course, when you have something selected and you press Shift C, you're gonna have additional options. So you can remove this from collections, so completely delete it. You can also, with something selected, you can, move it to a new collection. So you can create a new collection and move it there. Or you could also add it, right, to collection 1. So it's gonna create a duplicate, okay? So now this cube is gonna be appearing in both collections, in collections 1, right, and collection 2. So, both collections, which is kind of interesting. So that will be it about collection pie. Really cool stuff. Try it out. Very handy. Now, next pie is something I will not be explaining because this is something I completely do not use. Also, it requires changing some Python coding, which is something I fucking hate doing. If you would like to try this one, just look up the documentation. What it will allow you to do, it will allow you to switch between different workspaces without actually camera angle changes, and everything stays the same, but the workspace changes. So it's really cool to move between different workspaces, like sculpting, texture painting, modeling, etc. I don't use it at all, so I don't really care. But if this is something you would like to do, go for it. Honestly, I will never use this. Now the last menu here, the Tool Pies menu, I will show you in a different Blender, because I need to have Hard-Ups and Box Cutter installed. I really don't like it because it changes the Pie menu behavior from Box Cutter, and just I really, it's not my thing. I prefer the original one. So I'm gonna turn it on and I'll show you what it does. If I'm going to go here and press Q, I'm gonna have a completely different menu, and this is not something I would like, because my Hard-Ups menu is gone basically, so that's really irritating. And my cutting menu is under D menu for box cutters, so I really don't need that. So if you want to use it, sure, but I think Machin is using the very basic tools from Hard-Ups and box cutter, which is why I rebuilt this menu. But for me, this is complete garbage, so I'm not using it. When I press Q, I want to have access to my menu in Hard-Ups, which is what this add-on is remapping. So for me, this is completely useless. But the main pie is gonna be Modes Pie, Views Pie, Align Pie, and Cursor and Origin Pie. These 4 pies are essential for really efficient workflow. So in next video, we're gonna be talking about all these tools. All right, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.